Hitman World of Assassination has finally received its long-awaited PSVR2 treatment, but does the sneaking, scheming and dastardly acts translate to Sony's headset? Let's find out in our review. Hello everyone, it's Aaron here from Push Square, and yes, I've been playing Hitman in VR, something that IO Interactive has tried in the past. Arriving with Hitman 3, an ill-fated PSVR port was not quite terrible, but not far from it. Obviously, Sony's technology was a bit dated by this point, but even still, motion through the DualShock 4 only allowed control of one hand, you transitioned from VR to flat screen when aiming down sights, and a blurry resolution made it borderline unplayable. It was really disappointing. So the concept of trying that all again but with Sony's far flashier PSVR2 was a promising one, but I certainly didn't want to get burnt once more. However, from the moment that I booted up Hitman World of Assassination on the PSVR2, it was clear that this is in another league from the clunky days of the last gen headsets. World of Assassination on the PSVR2 does exactly what it says on the tin. It allows you to play all 21 mainline missions entirely in VR. If you've never played the Reboot trilogy before, you have upwards of 150 hours of VR content to sift through if you're inclined to complete all of the challenges and master each level. However, even if you have played the series before like I have, it is an entirely different kind of experience. I sunk roughly 50 hours into Hitman 3 when it launched back in 2021, and I haven't really been back since. But booting up a level like On Top of the World in Dubai just feels so different. The shift in perspective makes a fundamental change to your experience with the game, that if you were playing for the first time, you basically have two very replayable versions of Hitman to try out with both the VR and flat screen versions. I couldn't get over the scale of its levels, but more importantly, obviously having played the PSVR version, was the level of clarity that it holds here with the PSVR2. It's impressive just how crowded its levels remain too, like the Paris showstopper in the very first level of the series, or the Miami racing crowds in its finish line level. It somehow withstands fairly intense visual scrutiny and still plays around with the light in very impressive and immersive ways. However, what it looks like is only part of the puzzle, of course. So how does it actually control? Well, you can imagine that this is a substantial update over the PSVR port, with the Sense controllers allowing for much more accurate motion controls and also individual control of the left and right hands. It's not perfect by any means, and I think things like breaking open doors with crowbars or unscrewing things with the screwdriver can be very finicky. However, the moment to moment just feels much more fluent, natural, and most importantly, simplified. Opening and closing doors just requires a tap of the hand. Removing outfits from unconscious workers is done with a sort of pulling motion, and awkward things like ladders actually cut back to a third-person view, which I think gets rid of some of that jank. The most notable improvement over the flat screen version for me are the gunfights. You obviously don't want to get into one, but it does happen, and when it does, Hitman has a really satisfying feel to its various guns in VR. We all know that when shootouts occur in the flat screen version, it's not the best. You can tell it's not a third-person shooter. And while here it's still hard to aim, there is actually this nice aim assist feature where you have to squeeze the trigger and a red pathway of impact will be visible. Gunfights were actually quite hectic and fun, dipping in and out of cover. It was fun to shoot an enemy, run by, pick up his weapon so you didn't need to reload, and of course there is manual reloading too. It's also incredibly satisfying to throw hammers, bricks, bottles or whatever off of unsuspecting heads thanks to the item essentially locking onto whoever is in that direction. Throwing items just feels great here.
Hey, I need assistance.
Now there are a couple of areas which I don't think translate quite as well to VR, like the amount of items lying around that look like you could pick them up, but you can't. Obviously being in VR, everything seems within reach, and while what's interactable and not in the flat screen version is obvious, I did have a bit of an adjustment period when I first started playing the VR version. Secondly, Hitman is a game about patience. You'll quite often find yourself waiting in corridors for guards to turn around or for everything to line up just right. In VR, standing around can get a little bit uncomfortable. It was never a deal breaker, of course, and it's obviously part of the fun of Hitman, but I was certainly more aware of the fact that I was standing around, which was something I never felt the issue with when playing the flat screen version. You don't feel that time the same. Obviously, to counter this, you could just sit down when playing in VR, but personally, I don't really like playing my VR games like this. However, it's a massively more immersive game than what it was before. It lacks the sleekness that you find in the flat screen version, but peering around corners, lining up shots, dragging unconscious bodies all feel like a far more engrossing version of the game. I could see this being really popular in the hardest difficulty, as there is actually a far more limited scope to your vision that comes with first-person VR like this. It can make it feel like a much more difficult, grounded game, which I quite liked. To talk about the content itself for a second, Hitman World of Assassination is an enormous package. As I mentioned, you have all 3 mainline campaigns making up 21 missions, and you can also play the elusive target renditions of those levels too. Sadly though, all DLC missions, i.e. those not using maps from the base campaign, are not supported here, and neither is the freelancer mode at the time of the review. Even still, Hitman World of Assassination is a phenomenal content offering with dozens if not hundreds of hours of VR content. Said VR content is also impeccably designed, with dense yet expansive levels that reward experimentation and exploration. With levels ranging from secret labs to high-flying clubs, each with their own distinctive visual style, replaying again and again to kill your targets in some new inventive ways. It's a real feat from IO Interactive, made all the more impressive now that the game is entirely playable in VR. Hitman World of Assassination on the PSVR2 is the VR port that we've been waiting for, taking IO's impeccable collection of murder mazes and making them accessible on Sony's latest headset is no small feat, as showcased by its failed first attempt on the PSVR. While it comes with some VR jank, which I think is to be expected, it is impressive just how seamless a transition it is and how much it shakes up the Hitman experience. It's like playing a new game, one that's more immersive, a little bit wackier, and a lot of fun. With its plethora of content to work through, it's quickly become one of the most expansive VR offerings on Sony's system, and not only that, one of the very best PSVR2 games that you could play. I'm giving Hitman World of Assassination on the PSVR2 a 9 out of 10. Thanks for checking out the review of Hitman World of Assassination. Have you tried it out yet? Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're there, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more PlayStation video content just like this. Anyway, until next time, I've been Aaron, and this has been Push Square.